I'm Harper, and I'm 17 years old. Right now I'm standing outside my locked bedroom door, my parents' voices still echoing through the wood. In my trembling hands is an acceptance letter to the Governor's Honors Program, the most prestigious summer opportunity in our state. The deadline to confirm is tomorrow morning at 9. My father's voice cuts through again, cold as winter steel. Apologize to your brother, or you're done with school entirely. Through the crack under the door, I can see Garrett's shadow, and I know he's smirking. I crumple the letter slowly, feeling something inside me crumple too, but not in the way they expect. What they didn't know was that I'd already made my decision, and it wasn't the one they wanted. Before we dive into what happened next, tell me where you're watching from. Have you ever dealt with family favoritism? Hit that like button if you want to see how this plays out, and subscribe because this story takes turns nobody saw coming. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what I did instead of apologizing. 3 days before that locked door, everything seemed almost normal, if you can call my family dinners normal. We sat around our dining table, the expensive kind my mother insisted on, when my father's consulting firm started bringing in serious money. The chandelier overhead cost more than most people's cars, and the silence between bites was thick enough to cut. My mother, Diane, kept refilling Garrett's glass with sparkling cider like he was royalty visiting from a foreign land. My father, Richard, had barely looked up from his phone all evening, but when Garrett cleared his throat importantly, Dad's attention snapped to him immediately. I got the acceptance email today, Garrett announced, his voice dripping with false modesty. Stanford early decision. Looks like I'm following in your footsteps, Dad. The way my father's face lit up, you'd think Garrett had just cured cancer. Mom actually clasped her hands together like she was praying, tears forming in her eyes. I sat there, my fork halfway to my mouth, frozen in the moment of my own invisibility. What they didn't mention, what nobody at that table acknowledged, was that I'd placed as a national finalist in the Scholastic Writing Competition 2 weeks earlier. My essay on generational trauma had beaten out 40,000 entries. I'd left the certificate on the kitchen counter the day it arrived. It had disappeared within hours, probably into the trash. But Garrett's acceptance, that was worth celebrating. Dad called for champagne, the expensive French stuff he saved for clients. I excused myself before dessert, claiming homework, and nobody even noticed when I left the table. That's when the real trouble started. I went upstairs to my room, the smallest bedroom in our 5-bedroom house, because Garrett needed space for his gaming setup and his creative thinking area, which was really just a place he went to play video games and pretend he was working. I'd been drafting my personal statement for my own college applications, and I kept the file on my laptop with 3 backup copies, because I'd learned early that nothing in this house was safe from Garrett's interference. But when I opened my document folder, my stomach dropped. The file modification date had changed. Someone had accessed it at 6:47 that evening, right during dinner. I pulled up the document history, and felt rage building in my chest like a physical thing. Garrett had copied my entire essay, the one I'd spent 3 months perfecting, the one about overcoming adversity and finding your voice when nobody's listening, had pasted it into his own application folder. I could see the trail because he was careless. Always had been. He didn't need to be careful because consequences never found him. I grabbed my phone and started taking screenshots. Photos of the file properties, the metadata, everything that proved what had done. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Garrett pushed open my door without knocking, which he never did because boundaries didn't apply to the golden child. Working hard, he asked, leaning against my doorframe with that insufferable smirk. I turned my laptop screen away. You stole my essay, I said flatly. His eyebrows rose in mock surprise. That's a serious accusation, Harper. You got any proof? I held up my phone with the screenshots. His expression didn't even flicker. He just laughed, actually laughed, and pulled out his own phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, and then my phone buzzed. A notification that my cloud storage password had been changed. Then another notification. My screenshots were being deleted remotely. Had installed monitoring software on my phone months ago, probably during one of those family dinners when I left it charging in the kitchen. I watched helplessly as every piece of evidence disappeared. See, the thing is, Garrett said, stepping into my room and closing the door behind him. Nobody's going to believe you. They never do. But here's what they will believe. They'll believe that you've been hacking my computer, stealing my work, trying to sabotage me because you're jealous. My hands were shaking. I have nothing to be jealous of. You cheat at everything, he shrugged. Prove it. Oh wait, You can't. Because I'm smarter than you, Harper. I've always been smarter. That's why they love me and not you. The next morning, I woke up to my parents in my doorway, my father's face red with anger. The school had called. Someone had reported suspicious activity on the network, multiple attempted breaches into student-grade databases, all traced back to my student ID. Garrett stood behind them, his face arranged in perfect concern. I tried to tell you something was wrong, he was saying to Dad. She's been acting strange lately, paranoid. I think the pressure's getting to her. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. I didn't hack anything. I don't even know how to do that. But my father had already made up his mind. I could see it in his eyes. We're going to the school. Now. Get dressed. That meeting was the first time I truly understood how alone I was. The principal's office smelled like old coffee and disappointment. Principal Hayes sat behind his massive desk, my parents in the chairs beside me, and Garrett had somehow been invited too, playing the concerned brother perfectly. Hayes pulled out a folder and spread its contents across his desk. Printed logs of login attempts, my student ID number, highlighted in yellow on every single page. Harper, he began, his voice heavy with disappointment. These attacks on our grade database occurred over the past 2 weeks. The IT department traced them definitively to your account. I leaned forward, studying the logs. Someone used my login information. I would never do this. Check my computer, check my search history. You won't find anything because I didn't do it. But then Hayes pulled out another piece of evidence that made my blood run cold. Photos of my locker, the door hanging open, and inside were stacks of $20 bills rubber banded together and photocopies of upcoming tests for 3 different classes. We found these during a random locker search this morning, Hayes said quietly. My mother gasped beside me. An actual theatrical gasp like Shed practiced it. Oh, Harper, how could you? I spun to face her. Mom, I've never seen that money before. Those aren't my test copies. Someone planted them. But Garrett was already shaking his head sadly. I've noticed her spending more lately, he said, his voice perfectly modulated with concern. New clothes, eating out. I thought maybe she got a job. But now. My father stood up abruptly. Principal Hayes, I apologize for my daughter's behavior. This is completely unacceptable. We'll handle this at home, and I assure you there will be serious consequences. Hayes nodded slowly. Harper, you're suspended for 3 days pending investigation. If we find any evidence you sold those tests, this will become a police matter. The walk to the car was silent. When we got home, my father's business associate, a man named Walter Preston, was waiting in our living room. Had apparently been scheduled for a meeting, but now he got a front row seat to my humiliation. Dad didn't even wait until we were alone. Right there, in front of Walter, he laid into me about responsibility, trust, and how I was throwing away every opportunity they'd given me. My mother stood beside him, nodding along, occasionally adding her own remarks about how disappointed she was. Garrett sat on the stairs, watching. I caught his eye once, and he winked. Actually winked. That night, grounded in my room with my phone taken away, I heard the mail slot clatter. I waited until the house was quiet, then snuck downstairs. Among the bills and junk mail was a thick envelope addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened it. The Governor's Honors Program. The letter began. We are pleased to inform you of your acceptance. This was it. This was my ticket out. My chance at something beyond this suffocating house and the constant shadow of Garrett's false achievements. The program ran for 6 weeks over the summer, and students who completed it received automatic consideration for full scholarships at 15 major universities. It was everything I'd worked toward for 3 years. The deadline to accept was in 72 hours. I clutched the letter to my chest and actually let myself hope for the first time in months. The next morning, I woke early and went downstairs to make copies of the acceptance letter. I wanted backups of everything now. But when I got to the kitchen, Garrett was already there, making coffee. He saw the letter in my hands. What's that? He asked casually. I should have lied. I should have hidden it. But some small, stupid part of me still wanted to share good news with my family. I got into the Governor's Honors Program, I said quietly. His eyes narrowed slightly, then cleared. Hey, that's great, Harper. Really. Let me see. He reached for the letter, and I handed it over, watching as he read it. Then, in a movement so quick I barely registered it happening, he picked up his coffee mug and tipped it. Hot liquid splashed across the letter, the ink running immediately, the paper warping and dissolving. Oh no, he said flatly. Accident. I grabbed the letter from him, but it was ruined, completely illegible. You did that on purpose. He shrugged. Prove it. Besides, you really think Mom and Dad are going to let you go to some program after what you did at school? You're grounded, remember? You don't deserve opportunities when you behave this way. I ran to find my parents. My father was in his home office, and I burst in without knocking. Dad, Garrett destroyed my acceptance letter. I got into the governor's honors program, and he ruined it on purpose. My father barely looked up from his computer. Harper, I don't have time for your drama. You're suspended from school. You think we're going to reward that behavior by sending you to some summer camp? The words hit me like a physical blow. It's not a camp. It's an academic program. It's important for college. Finally, he looked at me, and his expression was ice. College? You're lucky if we let you finish high school at this point. Until you learn to take responsibility for your actions and apologize to your brother for your jealous behavior, we're not discussing your future. I stood there, frozen. Apologize to Garrett? For what? My father's voice rose. For hacking his computer, for trying to sabotage him, for making this family a constant source of stress and disappointment. Apologize, or there will be more consequences. I left his office and went back to my room. That's when I heard Garrett's voice outside my door, barely a whisper. Apologize and maybe he'll let you go to your little program. Maybe. But you'll have to beg really nicely. That brings us to now. To me, locked in my room with my parents' ultimatum echoing through the door. 24 hours to think about apologizing, they said. 24 hours to come to my senses. I sat on my bed, staring at the destroyed acceptance letter I'd tried to salvage, and felt something inside me finally, completely break. Not break like shatter, but break like a dam giving way, releasing something that had been building pressure for years. It'd been playing by their rules my entire life, trying to be good enough, trying to earn love that was apparently reserved exclusively for Garrett. But their rules were rigged, the game was fixed, and I was done playing. I went to my closet and pulled out a box from the very back, hidden under old yearbooks. Inside was my old laptop, the one I'd gotten for my 14th birthday, before Garrett convinced my parents I needed better supervision, and they replaced it with a new one that had parental monitoring software installed. This old laptop still worked. I'd kept it charged, kept it hidden, because some part of me had always known I might need a secret. I powered it up and logged into my old email account, the one I'd made before my parents started monitoring everything. Hundreds of unread messages, mostly spam, but I wasn't looking for new mail. I was looking for old conversations. I started searching through Garrett's name, looking for anything I might have saved, and that's when I found it. An entire folder of forwarded emails, messages Garrett had sent to his friend Trevor about me. I'd set up an auto-forward rule years ago, when I first suspected Garrett of sabotaging me, and I'd completely forgotten about it. Now I opened email after email, my hands trembling as I read. Plans to make me look bad at school. Detailed strategies for turning our parents against me. Discussions about the company inheritance our father had apparently promised to whichever child proved most successful. That's what this had all been about. Not sibling rivalry, not natural competition, but calculated, systematic destruction of my future, so Garrett could secure his financial inheritance. The emails went back 3 years, 3 years of documented psychological warfare. I was still reading when I heard shouting downstairs. My parents' voices, raised in actual argument, which almost never happened. I crept to my door and pressed my ear against it. Has gambling again, Richard. My mother was yelling. I found the statements. Has lost $20,000 in the past 2 months. My father's response was quieter, but I caught the words handle it and doesn't need to know. They were talking about Garrett. I filed that information away. Then I heard my father's voice getting closer. And now the school called about Harper's summer program. Apparently she was accepted to something important, and we missed the confirmation deadline. It was today. My mother's sharp intake of breath. Well, she doesn't deserve it anyway after what she did. Footsteps on the stairs. My door handle rattled. Harper, your mother and I need to speak with you. But I didn't unlock the door. I couldn't. Because I'd just realized they'd deliberately let my deadline pass. They'd known about the program, had probably seen the letter before Garrett destroyed it, and they'd let my chance die without telling me. That's when my phone buzzed. Not my regular phone, which they'd confiscated, but an old phone I kept for emergencies, one they didn't know about. A text from an unknown number. It's Blake, your cousin. I'm outside. We need to talk. I opened my window and looked down. Blake stood in our backyard, their face tilted up toward me. Blake was my cousin from my mother's side, visiting for the summer, staying with my aunt 2 streets over. We'd always gotten along, but we weren't particularly close. I climbed out my window onto the roof, then down the trellis, something I'd done 100 times before. Blake grabbed my arm when I reached the ground. I heard Garrett on the phone an hour ago, they said without preamble. He was bragging to someone about destroying your future. He said he's got your parents so convinced you're the problem that he could probably get them to disown you entirely. Harper, what's going on? I looked at Blake's concerned face and felt tears start to fall for the first time in days. Everything's going on. Everything's been going on for years, and I didn't even fully realize it. Blake pulled me into a hug, then tell me everything, and let me help. We sat in the backyard shed where I used to hide as a kid, and I laid it all out. The framing at school, the stolen essay, the destroyed acceptance letter, the emails I'd just discovered, all of it. Blake listened without interrupting, their expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, they were quiet for a long moment. Then they said, I'm staying with you guys starting tomorrow. Mom's going on a business trip, and your parents agreed to let me stay in the guest room. I'll have access to the house, to Garrett's room, to everything. Whatever you need me to find, I'll find it. I wiped my eyes. Why are you helping me? Blake's smile was grim. Because I've watched Garrett be terrible his whole life, and get away with it. Because I've watched your parents treat you like you're invisible. And because someone needs to be on your side for once. That night, I climbed back into my room and didn't apologize. Instead, I started planning. I pulled up those old emails and began building a timeline, documenting every incident of sabotage, every piece of evidence I could find. By morning, I had the beginnings of a strategy. I wasn't going to apologize. I was going to fight back. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. Blake moved into our guest room the next day, all smiles and gratitude toward my parents for hosting them for the summer. Diane ate it up, always loving to play the gracious hostess. Blake and I barely made eye contact at dinner, but later that night, they appeared at my door with a laptop and a grim expression. Garrett's not as careful as he thinks, Blake whispered. His cloud storage is linked to the family computer downstairs. I accessed it from the guest room. Harper, you need to see this. We huddled over the laptop, and Blake pulled up folder after folder. Photos of Garrett at parties with clear drug paraphernalia visible. Grade reports showing he was failing 2 classes at Stanford before Head even started. Remedial courses Head had to take online. Financial statements showing massive transfers from my parents' accounts to Garrett's. But the worst discovery was a PDF file labeled Dad's Company Analysis. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. My father's consulting firm was hemorrhaging money, a bad investment, multiple lawsuits from former clients, debt piling up. This wasn't the successful business empire everyone thought it was. It was a house of cards about to collapse. Your dad's been hiding this from everyone, Blake said quietly. Has been using his personal savings to keep the business afloat. That's probably why the inheritance matters so much. There might not be much left to inherit. We kept digging. In another folder, I found email exchanges between Garrett and the Stanford admissions office. Not acceptance letters, but receipts. My father had donated $250,000 to the university's new science building 6 months before Garrett's acceptance letter arrived. He hadn't gotten in on merit. Had been bought in. I sat back, my mind racing. This is it. This is everything we need to prove what he's been doing. Blake nodded. But you need more than just proof. You need allies. People who will stand with you when you expose all this. As if summoned by the word, my old phone buzzed. Miss Patricia Morrison, my school counselor, had sent an email to my emergency account. Harper, I know you didn't cheat. The evidence against you doesn't add up. I've been teaching for 20 years, and I know planted evidence when I see it. If you need help, call me. Anytime. I showed Blake the email. She's the first adult who's believed me. The next morning, I snuck out early and went to Miss Morrison's house. She opened the door in a bathrobe, coffee in hand, and just said, "Come in." We sat at her kitchen table, and I showed her everything. The emails, the financial records, the photos, all of it. She listened, her expression growing harder with each piece of evidence. When I finished, she said, "I've suspected Garrett for years. He bullied 3 students when he was at the school, but his parents always made it go away. I couldn't prove anything then. But this, she tapped the laptop screen. This is proof. She stood up and pulled out her phone. I have a friend who works in the district attorney's office. She specializes in fraud cases, and I know the director of the governor's honors program personally. We're going to fix this, Harper. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope stirring in my chest, but it was quickly crushed when my phone rang. My father's number. Where are you? His voice was ice. You left without permission. Get home now. I got home to find both my parents waiting, along with Garrett, who looked entirely too pleased with himself. My father's face was red with anger. We've been more than patient with you, Harper, but running away? That's the final straw. We're scheduling an appointment with a psychiatrist. Clearly, you need professional help. I stared at him. I don't need a psychiatrist. I need you to actually listen to me. My mother shook her head. We've listened enough to your lies. Doctor, Sheffield has an opening on Friday. You'll be evaluated, and we'll discuss medication options. Medication. They wanted to medicate me into compliance. I looked at Garrett, and he was practically glowing with satisfaction. This was his master stroke, convincing my parents I was mentally unstable. But I couldn't fight this one head on. Not yet, so I just nodded. Fine. I'll go. That seemed to surprise them. My father's anger deflated slightly. Good. Finally. Some sense. I went to my room and immediately texted Blake and Miss Morrison. They're trying to label me as mentally ill. We need to move faster. Blake responded within seconds. Found something else. Your aunt called. Extended family gathering is being planned for your dad's 50th birthday in 2 weeks. Everyone will be there. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, everyone. I stared at the text, an idea forming. A gathering meant witnesses. It meant people who might actually listen. It meant an opportunity. Then another message came in, this time from an unknown number. Harper, this is Sienna, Garrett's ex. We need to talk. He did something similar to me last year. I have evidence too. I met Sienna the next day at a coffee shop across town. She was a year older than me, already in college, and she carried herself with the kind of hard-won confidence that comes from surviving something terrible. She slid a flash drive across the table. Audio recordings of Garrett admitting he framed me for plagiarism at our old school. He got me expelled. I lost my scholarship, had to transfer. I've been building a case against him for months, but I didn't have enough on my own. When I heard what he's doing to you, I knew we could help each other. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop right there and listened. Garrett's voice, clear as day, bragging about his manipulation tactics, laughing about how easy it was to destroy people's lives, admitting to forging documents, planting evidence, turning families against their own children. This wasn't just about me. Garrett had been doing this to people for years. Sienna leaned forward. I want to be there when you take him down. I want to watch his face when he realizes he finally can't talk his way out of it. I looked at her determined expression and felt my team growing stronger. Blake for inside intelligence, Miss Morrison for institutional support, Sienna for corroborating evidence and testimony. We weren't just fighting back anymore. We were building a case. My first move was surgical and precise. I created an anonymous email account and sent a carefully worded message to Walter Preston. My father's business associate Wad witnessed my humiliation. The email contained just one thing: proof that Garrett's Stanford acceptance had been purchased, not earned. Bank transfer receipts, email confirmations, the whole paper trail. I didn't editorialize. I didn't explain. I just let the evidence speak for itself. Walter was known in business circles for his rigid ethics. Dad had once told a story about how Walter had ended $1 million partnership because the other party had lied on a minor disclosure form. Integrity was everything to him. I sent the email and waited. The response came faster than I expected. That evening, Walter called my father, and I could hear Dad's voice through his office door, rising in panic. It's a misunderstanding, Walter. Every parent helps their children with the college process. That donation was separate from Garrett's application. But Walter apparently wasn't buying it. I heard my father's tone shift from defensive to pleading. Don't make this about business, Walt, please. The call ended, and Dad emerged from his office looking pale. He called for Garrett immediately. Did you tell anyone about the Stanford donation? Garrett looked genuinely confused. No, sir. Who would I tell? I watched from the stairs, invisible as always, as my father's perfect world started to crack. He didn't suspect me yet. Why would he? In their minds, I was the screw-up, not the strategist. The next afternoon, Blake texted me with news. Your mom went to the country club today. Sienna was there with her own mother. They happened to run into each other. Sienna had played it perfectly. Casual conversation, a mention of how Shed heard the family was doing well, a carefully placed comment about how hard it must be when children struggle with gambling problems. My mother had apparently gone very still. Gambling? Diane had asked. Sienna played innocent. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you knew. When Garrett and I were dating, he had such trouble with online poker. I assumed Head told you when he asked for money to cover his debts. Blake reported that our mother had left the club immediately and gone straight home. I was in my room when I heard her confronting Garrett. How much have you lost? Her voice was shaking. Garrett, smooth as ever, denied everything at first. But Mom had already started looking. Shed found the bank statements, the transfer records, all the evidence Shed been willfully ignoring for months. The argument escalated, and then my father came home. For the first time in my memory, my parents fought about Garrett. Actual raised voices. Actual accusations. I sat in my room and listened to the Golden Boy's pedestal wobbling. But Garrett was smart. He didn't stay defensive for long. By dinner, Head shifted tactics, playing the victim beautifully. I made mistakes, I admit it. But I'm getting help. I'm working on myself. Unlike some people in this family, who just cause problems and refuse to take responsibility. His eyes flickered to me meaningfully. And just like that, my parents' anger redirected. I was still the real problem. Garrett was just a good kid who'd made some bad choices. That night, Garrett came to my room. He didn't bother knocking, just walked in and closed the door behind him. I know you're behind this, he said quietly. I don't know how, but I know it's you. I looked up from my homework, kept my face neutral. Behind what? His jaw clenched. The email to Walter. The conversation at the country club. You're trying to sabotage me. I shrugged. Sounds like paranoia. Maybe you should see a psychiatrist. His hand shot out and grabbed my desk chair, spinning it violently. This isn't a game, Harper. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I stood up slowly, keeping the desk between us. Actually, Garrett, I know exactly what you're capable of. I've been documenting it for years. His eyes narrowed. You have no proof of anything. I smiled. Don't I? He left then, but I could see it rattled him. Good. Let him feel uncertain for once. But he wasn't done. The next morning, I woke to find my social media accounts had been hacked. My Instagram, my Facebook, everything. Posts had been made from my accounts, rambling, incoherent posts, about how I'd been lying, how I'd framed myself for attention, how I was mentally unstable, a full public confession that I'd never written. My phone exploded with notifications. Friends from school messaging me, asking if I was okay, if I'd really done all those things I'd been accused of. Some of them believed the posts, some of them called me a liar. By noon, my entire social circle had turned against me. I sat on my bed, staring at my phone, watching my reputation disintegrate in real time, and felt despair creeping in. Blake found me like that, silent tears running down my face. He hacked everything, I whispered. Everyone thinks I'm crazy now. Blake sat beside me and put an arm around my shoulders. Let them think it. We know the truth, and we're going to prove it. Miss Morrison called that afternoon. Harper, I heard what happened. I want you to stay with me for a few days. Get out of that house, get some space, regroup. I packed a bag and climbed out my window one more time. When my parents discovered I was gone, Garrett played it perfectly. I found out later from Blake that Head told them I'd run away, that I was spiraling, that I was dangerous to myself. My parents actually filed a missing person report, but since I was with Miss Morrison, a school employee, and I contacted them to say I was safe, there wasn't much they could do legally. Still, they tried. My mother called Miss Morrison's house repeatedly, threatening lawsuits for harboring a runaway. But Miss Morrison had been a teacher for 2 decades. She knew the law. I was 17, nearly an adult, staying with a trusted educator. There was nothing illegal about it. At Miss Morrison's house, I met Nathaniel Webb, the assistant to Principal Hayes. He was a quiet man in his 30s who'd always seemed to blend into the background at school. But when he sat down across from me in Miss Morrison's living room, his eyes were sharp and focused. "I've been waiting for someone to stand up to Garrett for 3 years," he said without preamble. "I have access to school records going back to his freshman year. Forged recommendation letters, plagiarized essays, changed grades in the system, has been doing this his entire academic career." Nathaniel pulled out a folder thick with documentation. Every instance of academic fraud, every suspicious grade change, every time Garrett had cheated the system and gotten away with it. "Why didn't you report this before?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable. "I tried. Twice. Each time, your father made substantial donations to the school, and my concerns were dismissed. Principal Hayes told me to drop it or risk my job, so even the school had been complicit, bought off by my father's money." We spent that evening organizing evidence into a comprehensive timeline. Blake joined us, bringing more discoveries from Garrett's cloud storage, financial records showing he'd been selling test answers to other students for months, screenshots of conversations where he bragged about his manipulations, a particularly damning group chat where he and his friends discussed who they could frame next for their own academic dishonesty. But then my phone buzzed with an alert that made my blood run cold. An email notification from the governor's honors program. "We have received a withdrawal of your application from your parent or guardian. We're sorry to see you go." I called the program director immediately, my hands shaking. "I didn't withdraw. Someone impersonated my father." The director's voice was sympathetic but firm. "We received a phone call from someone identifying themselves as Richard Harper, your father. He said your family situation had changed, and you needed to decline your acceptance. I'm sorry, but the spot has been offered to another student now." Another attack. Another piece of my future destroyed. I hung up and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying not to scream. Miss Morrison found me like that, and pulled me into a hug. "We're going to fix this. I promise you. We're going to fix all of it." But I was hitting my limit. Every time we made progress, Garrett struck back harder. How could we win against someone who had no boundaries, no ethics, no line he wouldn't cross? That's when Blake appeared in the doorway, holding something. I found this in Garrett's room, hidden in a hollowed-out book. I think you need to see it. It was a journal, Garrett's journal, and inside were pages and pages of detailed plans, written in his handwriting, documenting exactly how Head systematically destroyed my life over the past 3 years. Not just actions Head taken, but future plans. Strategies for getting me kicked out of the house entirely. Ideas for ruining my college applications. Notes about how to turn extended family members against me. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was a calculated, long-term campaign of psychological abuse, and Head documented all of it like he was proud of his work. I read the journal with Blake and Miss Morrison and Nathaniel all watching my face. When I finished, I was shaking, but not with despair anymore. With rage. Pure, focused rage. "He wrote it all down," I said quietly. "Every crime, every manipulation, every lie. He wrote it all down because he never thought He'd face consequences." Miss Morrison nodded grimly. "This is evidence of premeditated harassment. Combined with everything else we have, this could result in serious legal consequences for him." The next morning, Madeline Chen showed up at Miss Morrison's door. She was the editor of our school newspaper, a senior with a reputation for investigative journalism that had gotten her accepted to Columbia's journalism school. "I heard you have a story about systematic cheating at our school," she said directly to me. "I want to publish it." I looked at Miss Morrison, who nodded. "The school newspaper has editorial independence. Principal Hayes can't stop you from publishing if the facts are solid." Madeline sat down with us and listened to everything. Then she smiled. "This is going to be my best piece ever, and it's going to run the day before your father's birthday party." We had a plan now. A real, comprehensive plan. The school newspaper would expose Garrett's academic fraud. Miss Morrison would submit formal complaints to the district. Nathaniel would provide official documentation. Blake would testify to what they'd witnessed. Sienna would share her own story, and I would present everything at the family gathering, in front of everyone who mattered. But Garrett wasn't done. Head somehow found out I was planning something. Maybe Head noticed Blake's increased snooping. Maybe Head seen Madeline talking to me. Whatever tipped him off, he decided to strike first. My parents received a call from someone claiming to be a therapist, saying I'd made threats against family members and needed immediate psychiatric intervention. The call was fake, of course. Garrett had probably gotten one of his friends to make it. But my parents believed it instantly. They showed up at Miss Morrison's house with police officers, demanding I return home immediately for my own safety. Miss Morrison stood in her doorway, blocking their entrance. Harper is safe here. She's not a danger to anyone, and unless you have a court order, she's not going anywhere. The police officers looked uncomfortable. One of them, an older woman named Officer Sullivan, pulled my father aside. Sir, your daughter is 17. She's staying with a school employee voluntarily. There's no crime here. Unless you can provide actual evidence, she's a danger to herself or others. We can't force her to leave. My father's face went purple with rage, but there was nothing he could do. They left, but not before my mother shouted through Miss Morrison's door. You're destroying this family, Harper. Everything that's happening is your fault. That night, Blake sent me a video they'd secretly recorded. My parents, sitting in the living room, discussing me like I was a problem to be solved rather than their daughter. We can have her committed, my father was saying. If we get Dr. Sheffield to sign off on it, we can have her in a psychiatric facility for evaluation. Minimum 72 hours. That'll keep her quiet through my birthday party. My mother nodded. Garrett suggested it. Has so worried about his sister. He even offered to pay for the facility himself. I watched the video 3 times, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. They were willing to have me institutionalized. They were willing to lock me away to preserve their perfect image. There was no going back from this. No reconciliation. No happy ending where they realized their mistakes. This was war, and I needed to accept that. Sienna texted me that night. I got the final piece. Video of Garrett admitting everything. He doesn't know he was being recorded. I set him up with a fake account, pretended to be a girl interested in his techniques for getting ahead. He bragged about all of it, including what he did to you. She sent me the video file. 10 minutes of Garrett explaining in detail how Head framed me, manipulated our parents, destroyed my opportunities, all delivered with smug pride to someone he thought was impressed by his cleverness. It was perfect. It was damning. It was exactly what we needed. I made the decision to go home, but on my terms. Miss Morrison called Officer Sullivan and arranged for police escort, just to ensure my safety. When we pulled up to my house, my parents were forced to let me in with witnesses present. Garrett's face when he saw me walk through the door with a police officer was priceless. Shock, then fury, then a quick rearrangement into concern. Harper, we've been so worried, he said, moving toward me with open arms like he planned to hug me. I stepped back. Don't touch me. My mother gasped. How dare you speak to your brother that way after everything he's done for you? Officer Sullivan cleared her throat. Mom, I'm just here to ensure Harper gets into the house safely, but I'm noting the family dynamics for my report. That seemed to calm my parents slightly. They couldn't perform their usual dramatics with an officer present. Once Sullivan left, after confirming I was settled, the masks came off. But Id changed too. I wasn't the desperate, defensive girl they'd locked in her room a week ago. I looked at Garrett directly. I know everything. Every single thing you've done. And I have proof. His eyes narrowed. You're delusional. I pulled out my phone and played a 10-second clip from Sienna's video. His voice filled the room. Harper was so easy to manipulate. Her parents wanted to believe I was perfect, so every lie I told about her, they ate it up. I paused the video and watched the color drain from Garrett's face. My father stepped forward. Where did you get that? I smiled. I have 3 hours of recordings like this. Video, audio, written documentation. I have your emails, your journal, your financial records. I have testimony from multiple witnesses. I have everything. Garrett's shock lasted about 5 seconds before transforming into rage. He lunged at me, and I barely had time to step back before Blake appeared from the hallway where they'd been waiting and got between us. Touch her and I'm calling the police back, Blake said firmly. But my parents didn't see Garrett's violence. They saw my provocation. My mother moved faster than I'd ever seen her move and slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. I touched my stinging cheek and looked at my father, waiting for him to say something, to stop her, to acknowledge that his wife had just hit his daughter. He just stood there. Silent. Complicit. You're all witnesses to that, I said quietly to Blake. Document everything. Blake was already filming on their phone. My mother realized what was happening and tried to grab the phone, but Blake was faster. You just committed assault on a minor. On video. Do you want to add theft to that? I left then, walking out of that house with Blake right behind me. We went straight back to Miss Morrison's. and she immediately called Vincent Wallace, her lawyer friend. Vincent listened to everything, watched the videos, reviewed the evidence, then he looked at me seriously. Harper, you have grounds for emancipation. You could also file for a restraining order against your brother, and your parents could face charges for child abuse and neglect. I sat with that information. What I want, I said slowly, is for everyone to know the truth. I want my extended family to see who these people really are. Then I want to be free of them. Vincent nodded. The family gathering is in 2 days. That's your opportunity. But you need to be prepared for the consequences. Once you do this, there's no going back. I looked at Blake, Miss Morrison, Sienna, who'd joined us. Nathaniel, who'd brought even more evidence. Madeline, who was finalizing her newspaper article. My chosen family. My real family. I'm ready, I said. We spent the next 48 hours preparing, organizing evidence into a clear, irrefutable presentation, preparing for every possible counter-argument, making sure every claim could be backed up with documentation. Madeline's article was scheduled to publish in the school newspaper's online edition the morning of the party. It would go live at 8 a.m., 3 hours before the family gathering started. The article was devastating, a complete exposé of Garrett's academic fraud, with quotes from Nathaniel, testimony from former victims, and screenshots of the evidence. The headline read, "Golden Boy or Con Artist, Inside One Student's Campaign of Manipulation and Fraud." The morning of my father's 50th birthday, I woke up early. Blake had snuck back into my parents' house the night before, and confirmed that the party was still on. My parents had decided to pretend everything was fine, to project the image of a perfect family one more time. They had no idea what was coming. At 8 a.m., Madeline's article went live. Within an hour, it had been shared across social media hundreds of times. Former classmates were commenting, adding their own stories of Garrett's behavior. The evidence was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. By 10 a.m., when I arrived at my parents' house with my entire team, the party was already in chaos. Extended family members were on their phones, reading the article, demanding explanations. My grandmother Dorothy, the family matriarch, stood in the center of the living room like a general surveying a battlefield. She saw me walk in, and her eyes narrowed. "Harper, explain what's happening now." I looked around at all the familiar faces. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, family friends. Walter Preston was there too. Everyone who mattered. "Give me 10 minutes, I said. "Let me show you everything, and then you can decide for yourselves what the truth is." My grandmother looked at my parents, then back at me. 10 minutes. Everyone sit down. The living room fell silent. 60 people crammed into my parents' expensive showcase home, and you could have heard a pin drop. I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the TV, my hands surprisingly steady. Blake stood beside me. Miss Morrison on my other side. Sienna sat in the front row, her expression fierce. I started with the emails. 3 years of documented plans to destroy my future, displayed on the 70-inch screen for everyone to see. My uncle Leonard leaned forward, reading the messages with growing horror. Then I showed the financial records. The proof that Garrett's Stanford acceptance had been purchased. The gambling debts my parents had covered up. The money they'd funneled to their golden boy while telling me I didn't deserve opportunities. My grandfather Harold made a sound of disgust. Next came the journal entries. I read them aloud, Garrett's own words describing me as collateral damage in his quest for the inheritance, explaining how easy it was to manipulate our parents, detailing exactly how Head framed me for cheating, for hacking, for everything. The room was completely silent now. I played Sienna's video. 10 minutes of Garrett bragging about his manipulation tactics, admitting to framing multiple people, laughing about how gullible everyone was. When the video ended, I showed the photos from his cloud storage. The drugs, the parties, the failing grades Head hidden, the evidence of systematic academic fraud going back years. Then I showed Blake's video from a week ago, my mother slapping me, my father standing silent, Garrett's violence barely restrained. Finally, I presented testimony. Nathaniel stood and confirmed everything from the school's perspective. Sienna shared her own story of being expelled because of Garrett's lies. Blake described what they'd witnessed living in this house for 2 weeks. Miss Morrison spoke about the pattern of behavior she'd observed, the other victims, the systematic nature of the abuse. When I finished, I looked at my parents. My father's face was white. My mother looked like she wanted to disappear into the expensive couch. And Garrett looked absolutely terrified. My uncle Leonard was the first to speak. Is any of this untrue? Can you disprove any of it? My father tried. He stood up, attempted his usual commanding presence. This is a misunderstanding. Harper has taken things out of context. She's been troubled for years, and we've been trying to help her. But my grandmother held up a hand. I just read that newspaper article. I saw the evidence from school officials. Richard, answer the question. Did you donate $250,000 to get Garrett into Stanford? Silence. Then my father quietly. It was an investment in his future. Walter Preston stood up. It was fraud. And I want it noted that I'm terminating our business relationship effective immediately. I don't work with people who lack integrity. Other family members started talking all at once. Accusations flying. People demanding answers. My mother tried damage control, her voice rising. This is private family business. Harper had no right to air this publicly. She's always been jealous of Garrett, always trying to cause problems. That's when my grandmother stood up, and everyone fell silent. Dorothy Harper was 82 years old and commanded respect like a queen. Diane, be quiet. Richard, sit down. Garrett, stop looking for the door. She turned to me. Harper, I believe you. I believe every word. Then she turned to my parents. I am ashamed of both of you. You have abused your daughter, enabled your son's criminal behavior, and lied to this entire family. Effective immediately, you are both removed as beneficiaries of the family trust. Your company shares are revoked. You will receive nothing. My father's face went from white to gray. Mother, you can't do that. The business needs that trust funding. Dorothy's smile was ice. The business is bankrupt anyway. I've known for 6 months, Walter told me. I was waiting to see if you'd be honest. You failed. She turned to me. Harper, you'll live with your grandfather and me. Well, fund your education. All of it. You'll never have to depend on these people again. I felt tears start to fall, but this time they were relief. But Garrett wasn't done. He suddenly lunged from his seat, not at me but toward the laptop, trying to destroy the evidence even now. Leonard caught him, bigger and stronger, and held him back. That's when Garrett lost it completely, screaming, fighting, and in his rage, he started talking. She deserved it. She was always in my way. Dad promised me the company if I was the successful one, and she kept trying to compete. I had to get rid of her. Complete confession, in front of 60 witnesses. Sienna was recording on her phone. So was Blake. So were half the people in the room. Garrett had just destroyed himself. The police arrived 20 minutes later, called by Walter, who had contacts at the district attorney's office. While they questioned Garrett, Madeline got a notification on her phone. The university just released a statement. Stanford is rescinding Garrett's acceptance and investigating the donation for fraud. Miss Morrison showed me an email. The governor's honors program director apologized. They're reinstating you with a formal letter of apology for the confusion. They're even extending your deadline for acceptance. My grandfather put his arm around me. Come on. Let's get you out of this house. You don't need to be here for the rest of this. I looked back once as we left. My father sitting in his expensive chair, staring at nothing. My mother crying theatrical tears that nobody was paying attention to anymore. And Garrett, being questioned by police, his perfect image shattered beyond repair. It was over. After 3 years of abuse, of gaslighting, of systematic destruction, it was finally over. I'd won. But victory felt less like triumph, and more like exhaustion. Like finally being able to set down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. 2 months later, I'm sitting in a lecture hall at the governor's honors program, surrounded by some of the brightest students in the state. The program is everything I hoped it would be, challenging and inspiring. I've made friends here, real friends who value intelligence and honesty. Nobody knows my story unless I choose to tell it, and that anonymity is precious. I'm just Harper here, not the girl whose family imploded spectacularly. Blake visits every weekend. We've gotten close through all of this, and they've become more like a sibling than Garrett ever was. They're planning to apply to colleges near wherever I end up, and we talk about maybe sharing an apartment someday. Found family, chosen family, the people who see you and stay anyway. Miss Morrison still texts me daily, checking in, sending encouragement. She helped me find a therapist who specializes in family trauma, and the sessions are slowly helping me untangle years of psychological damage. Some days are harder than others. Some days I still hear my mother's voice telling me I'm the problem. still feel the sting of that slap. But I'm learning that healing isn't linear, and that's okay. Garrett's situation resolved itself in the most predictable way possible. Stanford officially rescinded his acceptance. The district attorney declined to press criminal charges due to his age and lack of prior record, but he's got a file now. He enrolled in community college and is apparently working at a retail store to pay off his gambling debts. I heard through Blake that his friends abandoned him once his reputation collapsed. Turns out people only liked him when he was useful. My parents tried to reach out once. About a month ago. A letter addressed to my grandparents' house, where I'm living now. I held it in my hands for a long time before deciding to read it. It was full of justifications and deflections, attempts to rewrite history, suggestions that maybe we could all move past this if I just apologized for embarrassing them publicly. I threw it away without responding. Some things don't deserve a response. My grandmother found me afterwards and said something I'll never forget. Blood doesn't excuse cruelty, Harper. Family should build you up, not tear you down. Don't ever feel guilty for protecting yourself from people who hurt you, even if they're related to you. My grandfather has been quietly funding my future in ways my parents never did. New laptop for school, application fee waivers for colleges, a savings account in my name that he contributes to monthly. But more than the money, he listens. Actually listens when I talk, asks questions, remembers details. It's such a simple thing, being heard, but I'd gone so long without it that it still surprises me sometimes. Sienna and I meet for coffee once a week. She's thriving at her new university, and watching her succeed after everything Garrett did to her is inspiring. She told me once that exposing him was the most empowering thing she'd ever done. I spent a year feeling like a victim, she said. But the day we took him down, I got my power back. You did that for both of us. Nathaniel ended up leaving his job at the school. Hess working at the district office now, implementing new policies to prevent the kind of favoritism and fraud that let Garrett get away with his behavior for so long. Change happening because people finally spoke up. College acceptance letters started arriving last month. I got into 7 schools, with scholarship offers from 5. The essay I wrote for my applications was about finding your voice in spaces that try to silence you. Apparently it resonated. I'm leaning toward a school in another state, far enough from my parents that I'll never accidentally run into them, close enough to my grandparents that I can visit regularly. My future is bright in a way it never could have been if I'd stayed silent, if I'd apologized like they demanded, if I'd let them reshape me into something small and manageable. Speaking my truth had consequences, absolutely. I lost my parents, though I'm starting to understand they were never really mine to lose. I lost the fantasy of a happy family, the hope that someday they'd wake up and see me, but silence would have had worse consequences. Silence would have meant losing myself. Looking back now, I can see the pattern so clearly. Years of conditioning, to accept mistreatment, to doubt my own reality, to believe I was the problem. Classic gaslighting, textbook emotional abuse, but when you're living inside it, it's hard to see the shape of the cage. It took hitting absolute rock bottom, locked in my room with my future being destroyed, to finally see clearly, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I won't pretend the ending is perfectly happy. I still have moments of grief for the family I should have had. Therapy helps, but it doesn't erase the scars. Some damage is permanent, but I'm learning to carry it differently, to let it inform my strength, rather than define my weakness. I'm learning that walking away from toxicity isn't giving up, it's giving yourself a chance. I'm learning that family should feel like safety, not survival. The other students in this program have no idea what I survived to get here. To them, I'm just another high achiever, another ambitious student chasing dreams. And that's exactly what I want. To be defined by my future, instead of my past. To be known for what I create rather than what I escaped. My phone buzzes with a text from Blake. How's the program? Learning anything cool? I smile and type back. Everything here is cool. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And it's true. For the first time in my life, I'm not looking over my shoulder, not waiting for the other shoe to drop, not bracing for the next attack. I'm just here, present, free. The family gathering was 2 months ago, but it feels like a lifetime. That version of Harper, desperate and trapped, feels like a stranger now. This Harper, the one sitting in a college lecture hall with a future full of possibilities, she's who I was always meant to be. My grandmother was right. Blood doesn't excuse cruelty. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you, even when they share your DNA. even when it breaks your heart, even when the world tells you family is everything. Because here's what I learned. Family is everything, but only if it's the right family. The family that sees you, values you, protects you. The family you choose, not just the one you're born into. Blake, Miss, Morrison, Sienna, my grandparents, they're my family now. They're the ones who showed up when it mattered. They're the ones who believed me when everyone else called me a liar. They're the ones who stood beside me when I decided to fight back instead of surrender. So no, I never apologized to Garrett. I never will. Because I had nothing to apologize for. Instead, I stood up. I gathered evidence. I built a team. I exposed the truth. And I walked away from people who tried to destroy me. And you know what? I'd do it all again. So here's my question for all of you watching. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and speaking your truth? What did you choose, and how did it turn out? Drop your stories in the comments because I know I'm not the only one who's been through something like this. And if you're currently in a situation where you're being gaslit or manipulated by family, please know that speaking up is possible. It's hard, it's scary, and yes, there are consequences, but staying silent has consequences too. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe if you want to hear more about how I'm rebuilding my life, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to walk away from toxicity, even when it comes from family. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing me in a way my own parents never could. I'm sending strength to anyone out there, fighting their own battles with people who should protect them but don't. You deserve better. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and remember that the family you choose can be stronger than the family you were born into.